Maybe you're like me, terrified of the work week, not motivated in your job, Sunday scaries. Sound familiar at all? Well, 5 years ago, that's exactly where I was. In this video, I want to talk about how I transitioned from having no design experience to becoming a fully fledged UI UX designer at a top tech company in London, all within 6 months. I don't want to paint unrealistic expectations here. This kind of career transition is not easy, and it does take work and determination. But if you have the right ambitions, and this is something that you want, it absolutely can be done. I want to talk about some of the tools and techniques that I use to get there and how you can too. So let's jump in. Okay, so let's back up a bit. You might be thinking, why the pivot and why the transition in the first place? It might seem self-explanatory based on the Sunday scaries that I was talking about, but doing something with no experience, jumping into it head first, it's pretty scary. So the why is actually really important. And for me, that why was, I didn't want to roll out of bed in the morning and hate myself. I wanted to know that there was more out there than just getting up for a 9 to 5 that I dreaded every day. The bottom line is, I wanted to like my job. And I don't think that that is something that most of us should have to beg for. The way that you get there is by chasing the little things that make you happy. I really just started designing by accident, and I loved doing it so much. I just decided to chase that small feeling of happiness and make something more out of it. It's not simple enough, right? Well, it's not that simple, but we'll talk about some of the complications and how to overcome those. So I want to address this. If anybody is telling you that you can roll over in bed and slap some designs together without any experience to become a designer in a couple of months, they're lying to you. Or they're a genius, and I really want to get to know them. But the reality of this is that making a career transition, especially into something that you don't have any experience in, you can't just snap your fingers and make it happen. I wish that was the case, but like with anything in life worth doing, it does actually take some drive, commitment, and some effort to get there. So the why that I was talking about earlier, it's actually really important because you're going to need to remember that why as you're going through some of the ups and downs that come with a career transition. Being able to refer back to those reasons can actually be a really powerful way to stick to what you're doing. Maybe write down 3 or 4 of the reasons why you may be considering this kind of career change and this kind of pivot. You might be referring back to those in a couple of months when you're saying, why did I watch that video that Leander did? Those affirmations, those can bring you back. I'll give you a little hint. If it's just about money, it might not be enough for you. UX design is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Yes, it does pay well, but just getting a job takes time, and then you still need to work your way up. So it actually does help to like design. Now back to my own experience when I was actually starting to consider turning this into a full-time job. Sure, I'd done a couple of weeks of Photoshop and some Figma and helped my mom design her website, but was that enough to make a full-time career transition? I had a lot of questions when I started deliberating about whether or not I wanted to do this. Was it even possible with no experience? Were other people like me trying to do the same thing? How long was it going to take? What would my job prospects be? If I got a job, what would my career longevity look like? I Googled, talked to my parents, friends of friends, and I tried to talk to people that were in the industry by reaching out. And yes, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. Weird how it all comes full circle like that. But anyway, let's talk about some of the answers to those questions. Number 1, was it possible? Yes, it absolutely is possible to become a UX UI designer with no experience. You have to get the experience, but there are absolutely ways to do that without having been employed as a UX UI designer previously. So the answer to question number 2, is there anyone else like me out there doing this? Yeah, there are plenty of people out there doing this. In fact, statistics show that there are thousands of new UX designers joining the industry on a yearly basis. So trust me, you're not alone. In terms of how long it would take, well, this part really depends on you. It depends on how much time that you have to give. Transitioning into a discipline like UX UI design with no experience is really going to take anywhere between 3 and 12 months, just depending on the person, the situation, the circumstances, and how much time you have to dedicate to learning a new craft and learning a new skill. Once you actually get there and you start interviewing for roles, job prospects, and career longevity, again, these largely depend on you, and they depend on circumstances like the job market, the openings around you, but looking for a job, it's always going to be tough. Interviewing is its own skill. Maybe you've done interviews for jobs plenty of times and you'll be great at it. Maybe you have to learn a little bit about how to interview first. And so I can't promise that you're going to graduate from a boot camp or a program or teach yourself, have one job interview and then land a role. But I can promise you that the more you do this, the better you'll get at it and the higher your chances will become of landing a job. Regarding longevity as a UX designer, it's definitely gotten a little bit more complicated in the last year with big tech layoffs. However, industry statistics show that the UX design job market is only set to grow about 20% over the course of the next 6-7 years. And no, AI is not about to steal your job. I work for an AI company and I still work there, so I think I'll be fine. And so will you. Now that we've covered those questions, let's talk about the 2 actual things you'll need in order to get hired as a UX UI designer. The first one is a portfolio. Now, your portfolio is your key in the door. It is the way that you're going to start having conversations with hiring managers, get their interest, and the way that you're going to stand out to recruiters. You need to actually be able to show that you can use UX UI methodologies to come up with solutions and to come up with designs that solve real world problems. This doesn't mean that you need to have a ton of projects for actual companies and actual clients. You can absolutely use hypothetical scenarios. The important thing is that you show you understand what UX UI design is about and that you can use the tools and methods within the UX UI umbrella to solve problems and to come up with designs that improve a user's experience. What really helps when putting a portfolio together is using real companies as templates. You could redesign Spotify's home screen to make it easier for someone to create an account, redesign Amazon's checkout flow to make it easier for someone to actually pay for their stuff and complete their order. The list goes on. The point is, you need a portfolio to be taken serious as a candidate in this job market. The other thing that you need is expertise in a design software. Now, I don't care what anybody tells you, the only design tool worth learning these days is Figma. Yes, I know there are other ones like Adobe, Sketch, whatever. They're not as good as Figma. If anybody has a problem with Figma, that's fine. Just subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and post in your comment why you think there's a better tool out there, and I'll respond to it as soon as I can. Whatever design tool it is you end up learning, you need to showcase that you can use this tool to actually do design work. And this will probably happen quite naturally as you put a portfolio together. It's going to be the thing that you use every day at your job. So showing that you know how to use it is pretty necessary. I'm going to talk about a third thing that I think everyone needs when they try to break into this market. And to be honest, anyone that's looking for a job period can make use of this. And that is having a foot in the door. What I mean by that in a nutshell is knowing somebody that can vouch for you as a person, as a candidate, as an employee. Knowing someone that already knows you and that works at the company that you're interviewing for will be a massive leg up on everyone else that is interviewing there. Maybe you go to networking events. You have a friend that works at the company that you're interested in. Maybe they have a friend that works at the company you're interested in. People are surprisingly willing to help. And if you reach out, chances are someone's going to be willing to have a conversation with you. The reason I bring up this third point is because the only reason I got my first UX UI job is because I met the hiring manager for that job at a networking function. I shook his hand, I said hello, I made a good first impression, and that's how I got my interview. I don't know if that's why I ultimately got the job, but I don't know if I would have gotten the interview if I hadn't met him at that networking function. I'm not even sure I would have known that he was hiring for a role. So using your network can be an extremely valuable asset when you're looking for your first job or really any job. So now that we've covered the 2, ideally 3 things that everybody needs, let's talk about some of the ways that we can actually get those tools. And the first one that we're going to cover, by far the most conventional, is a design bootcamp. Now, you've probably heard of this before, but if you haven't, a design bootcamp is essentially like going back to school. Sounds fun, right? And a bootcamp is essentially 3 to 12 months of you learning everything there is to know about the basics and foundations of UX UI design. Now, there are a lot of bootcamps out there. I'm not going to go into any of them in depth in this video, but there are some things to consider when you're doing your research on bootcamps. And I'll post a link in the description below about the top 10 bootcamps that are outlined in a Forbes article. Each one comes with their own pros and cons and set of trade-offs. So it really just depends on what's valuable to you. And some of those things that I want to mention are, how do you learn best? Do you like to learn in person? Do you prefer the flexibility of learning online? Do you want to be paired with a one-on-one mentor, somebody that you can meet with on a weekly basis that gives you feedback, that informs the choices that you're making and helps you get better? Do you prefer primarily video teaching or reading? All of these things are important to consider when you're evaluating these different boot camps. And the other one that is quite crucial that I actually didn't think about when I was applying for boot camps, I wish I had, that is boot camps that come with hiring partners. Now, some boot camps will actually partner with companies like Google, Facebook, Uber. They will make it easier for you to get interviews at those companies if you graduate those boot camps successfully. Now, boot camp is the route that I chose. I'll talk a little bit about why that is. The main reason why I wanted to do a boot camp is because I wanted to structure a curriculum laid out for me to acquire the basics and the fundamentals in UX UI design that I needed in order to put my portfolio together. The other thing that I wanted was the assurance that other people had gone through this same process, this same boot camp, and had gotten jobs after it. It was just really helpful to know that other people had been in my shoes and had come out successful. Now, the downside of doing a boot camp comes down primarily to financial situation. Boot camps, regrettably, aren't free, and they'll cost you anywhere between $2,000 and $20,000 US dollars, depending on the one that you pick. Now, I know not everyone is in that financial situation where they can afford a boot camp like that, which brings us to method 2, and that is being self-taught. This route is arguably a little bit less conventional and a little bit more complicated because you have to hold yourself accountable. But there are a ton of resources available on YouTube, Google. There are free courses available that teach you the basics and the foundations of UX UI design. And remember, you don't need a diploma from a bootcamp to get a job. What you need is those two things that we talked about earlier in the video: a portfolio and showcase of your skills with a design tool, and that's it. If you can acquire those things by teaching yourself, the resources are at your disposal. I actually know plenty of people who have gone the self-taught route and become UX UI designers without going through a bootcamp. It might take a little bit longer, or it might be a bit more of a winding path, but it's a perfectly viable solution if you don't have the financial capabilities, or if that's just your preferred method of learning. And now the third vehicle that I want to talk about kind of complements the other two vehicles, and that is doing unpaid work as a UX UI designer or getting an unpaid internship. It doesn't necessarily even have to be unpaid. Some of these methods might pay as well, but there are plenty of people out there and small companies out there that need design help, and they can't afford to hire a more senior UX UI designer. They're constantly on the lookout for help that is cheaper and also eager to learn. And the reason that I bring up this third method is because this actually happened to me. While I was going through my design bootcamp, I was hired through a friend of a friend to help somebody redesign their website. This was a really lucky situation for me and another example of why you should really use your network, but more importantly, it was a great way for me to apply what I was learning to a real world situation. And it enabled me to put a project together that I was then able to put into a portfolio. Now, maybe you don't have a friend of a friend of a friend, but chances are if you put yourself out there, you post on your LinkedIn that you're available to help out, you post on your social media that you're available, or you ask your mom or your dad if they have any friends that need help redesigning their website or their landing page or their mobile application. There are people out there looking, and if you don't put yourself out there, you won't find them. So put yourself out there. And that's really it. Now, I just want to leave you guys with this thought. While it isn't just a straightforward road, you can go down this road if this is something that you want and if you're genuinely interested in becoming a designer. It'll come with its fair share of ups and downs. And so remembering why you went down this road in the first place is important. But just know that I was once where you're sitting. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know if it would ever happen. But I can tell you that where I was, I like my job so much more now than I did. And it's all thanks to taking that initial step towards figuring out what it takes to make this kind of career transition. So if you've made it to the end of the video, congrats. You're one step closer to making that an actuality. If you have any other questions about this process or UX UI design or anything in general, post below in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them. And I'm planning on making a lot more content like this. So if you have any other video ideas, whether it's interview advice, scaling up as a UX UI designer, getting better at the craft, more resources for being self-taught, you name it, post below and I'll try to incorporate them in a future video. For now, I wish you guys all the best of luck, and until next time, see you later.